Welcome. You're watching HLN Now. Brand new developments in the hot car death case. Again, it's a headline that's just even difficult to read when you think of 22-month-old Cooper Harris dying a horrific death inside of a car, and his own father, Ross, is charged with murder. Here's what we have as far as new information as we take a look at Cooper's mom, Leanna Harris. She has hired an attorney. We'll talk about that. As there you see her demeanor in court. That's been a topic of discussion. But really even bigger than that, toxicology reports back in this case, and here's what we're finding out, that there were no drugs found in little Cooper's system, because many had speculated, okay, was he sedated in some way prior to his death to calm him down before he would die in a hot car. But toxicology reports coming back negative, so we have that information for you. Again, we want to hear what you have to say. This is a story we continue to share with each other, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, or I'll take your calls. 1-877-TEL-HLN is the number. Let's introduce our expert panel, get them to weigh in on some of this new information, and again, help with the calls. Back with us, he's a great attorney, Philip Holloway. He's followed this closely, as has Ebony Williams, another great attorney. And Dr. E's with us, Dr. Erik Fisher, a psychologist. As again, that's part of this case, the mindset of everybody involved and how people do what they do and how it affects this case. But guys, let's go to the phones and we'll get to some of the information. Stella is with us in Georgia. Hey, Stella, your comment or question?
Yeah, Mike, I had a question. I know the law about husband and wife not having to testify against each other, but in this situation, if he is found guilty of murder and he gets the death penalty, can he incriminate her and say she was in on it, she knew it, we did it together? And if so, can she be arrested and charged based on what he says?
Okay, hey, great question, Stella. Philip Holloway, again, practices here in Georgia. Help us clarify that dynamic legally between husband and wife, what they can or are obligated or not obligated to say as this plays out.
Well, Georgia law has something known as the marital privilege. Generally speaking, a spouse cannot be compelled to testify against another spouse in a criminal proceeding. However, there is a very important exception that is at play here. If it involves death or injury to a child, the exception does not apply. However, should she become a co-defendant, the Fifth Amendment guarantees her the right to remain silent, and she could not be compelled to testify at all.
Gotcha. Okay. Ebony, let's hit on that other piece of information we're finding out. Toxicology reports negative. And again, that goes back to some that had speculated, well, maybe little Cooper was sedated in some way, shape, or form, right?
Certainly, Mike. And if the toxicology report had shown that there was some type of sedative at play here, that would have bolstered the prosecutor's claim of premeditation. So, look, the toxicology report being negative, if anything, it plays better for the defense, but I wouldn't say it's going to be all that telling either way. It would have helped the prosecution, but it doesn't help the defense that much.
Got it. Let's get another call in. Ben is with us in Massachusetts. Hey, Ben, your thoughts here?
How you doing, Mike?
Hey, great. Hey, Ben.
I had a theory on him switching out that car seat.
Mm.
So I believe that he knew what he expected to see when he left work that day to drive up the street a few miles and complete this crime and this murder. I believe that there's no chance in the world he wanted to get a look at that kid's face. And you can make the argument, don't look in the rearview mirror, but as we all know, sometimes you're inadvertently look in the mirror, and it's such a small car, you know, you're going to see it. I believe he did, even being as evil as he is, he wasn't prepared for what you expect to see on that kid's face. And listening to your expert yesterday on what a death in this man would look like, I can pretty much imagine what he expected to see.
Wow. All right. Hey, Ben, interesting theory there, and others have said it. All right. Dr. Erik Fisher's with us, Dr. E. And again, this is down the road, but some have said on this program, and we get your take on it, that, hey, one reason to have a rear-facing car seat is because you couldn't bear to look at little Cooper because you knew what you were going to do.
Right, right. And I think even if you look at that he is found to have committed this crime, one thing you have to consider is that his grief may have been real. It's very easy to plot a crime like this and see somebody as an object, and this child is not necessarily your child because it's just a person that you're trying to remove from a situation. Again, as if this is how it plays out. But when he realizes what he did, the grief and the permanency of that loss could have resulted in that show of emotion that he had that a lot of people have discussed.
Right. And Ebony, that goes back to, again, what we heard at the probable cause hearing on Thursday, talking about Detective Stoddard relaying a conversation, this according to police, between Leanna Harris and Ross, where Ross Harris says he looked peaceful. And also the quote, which is probably even more damning if you look at it, I dreaded what he would look like, past tense.
Absolutely. I think Ben's theory really makes a lot of sense to me, Mike. And we've seen this. I've been at scenes before where I've unfortunately had to retrace the steps of a death. And when it's a personal attachment to the victim, the murderer or the killer will cover that body up because they don't, with a sheet or something, because they don't want to see it. So I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's really unfortunate. And also to your point, Mike, about peacefulness, we heard the same thing from the mother when she gave the eulogy, talking about how at peace little Cooper was.
Wow. Okay, there you go. We're taking your calls, by the way, 1-877-TEL-HLN. We continue to share this story. You guys have had incredible insights and questions. Let's go back to the phones. Lois is with us in Pennsylvania. Hi, Lois, your thoughts?
Hi, Mike.
Hey.
I've been watching this case really close, and I find it so strange that no one is talking about the fact that Cooper was awake at the restaurant when approximately 3 minutes to Dad's work. The child would not be asleep in this period of time. A child that age talks. They talk constantly. 22 months old, they never shut up. Even if he said nothing, when the dad parked that car, he surely would have said, Daddy, get me out. Daddy, take me with you. Daddy, Daddy. He would have fussed. He would have made noise. And even though they say the father's deaf in one ear, I find it very hard to believe that he did not or could not hear this child say this. He knew this child was there. He heard him talking all the way from the restaurant until he got to the place where he worked. He heard that child begging him to take him with him. Child suffer from anxiety, separation anxiety at this age. They don't want to go to their own room at night. They end up with mom and dad in bed. This child has never once been left alone. He would have screamed and cried. That dad heard him.
Well, hey, Lois, that's one of the major problems here when you're talking about the defense, right, Philip? When, number one, just on a logistics front, I know you know that drive very well from the Chick-fil-A to the Home Depot. It's not even a minute, and you're going to forget the little guy's in there?
Yeah, I've been to that Home Depot a number of times myself. It's right by where I used to live. The prosecutor definitely laid out the case at the probable cause hearing that Lois's point, I think, is part of their rationale for charging him in the first place.
There you go. Okay, when we come back, more of your calls coming up, and we're also going to talk about Leanna Harris hiring an attorney, what that could mean, and why that would even be needed in a case like this. That much more coming up. Stay with us.
And in front of several witnesses, all of a sudden she states, Ross must have left him in the car. And they're like, what? There's no other reason. No other explanation, Ross must have left him in the car. And they try to console her, and they're like, no, there's 1,000 reasons there. He could have taken him to lunch or something. We don't know yet. And she's like, no.
Did his wife ever say anything to him about what he said to police?
And she asked him, she had him sit down, and he starts going through this, and she looks at him, she's like, well, did you say too much?
Comments like that we heard from Detective Stoddard there at the probable cause hearing could be part of the reason why Leanna Harris has now hired an attorney, Lawrence Zimmerman. Again, questions about her. Let's be clear now. She has not been arrested. She's not been named a suspect, but she is part of the investigation. She's Little Cooper's mom and the wife of the accused, Ross Harris. There is the attorney that's been hired, Lawrence Zimmerman. So, again, we have our expert panel with us. We're taking your calls at 1-877-TEL-HLN is the number. Ebony, your first reaction when you heard that Leanna Harris had hired an attorney?
About time, Mike. Quite frankly, I was surprised it took her this long. She's been a critical part of this investigation from the start. We heard the lead investigators talking about how she had been cooperating, so we know she's been interviewed many times by this law enforcement here in Cobb County, and she needs adequate representation, if for nothing else, Mike, to keep her from incriminating herself. She needs to cooperate, but certainly we all have the right to counsel in this country. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's not only what she said, but we're watching some of the video there, many questioning her demeanor in court as she's chomping on gum. Dr. E, help us out here. People at home see this and go, wait a minute, your little 22-month-old died a horrific death, and that's the way you're going to act.
Well, you know, I always look at these cases as a psychologist and a scientist, and I'm collecting data. So I always look at things from two angles. The one side is we don't know how numb she is from this whole experience. As you know, she lost her husband, she lost her child in this situation as she's seeing it evolve. And the other side is if this was a premeditated case or situation, then yeah, she's got her walls up, her distance up, and potentially there is somebody who could be pretty cold-hearted or cold-blooded in how she handled the situation. The rest will be hopefully bear out as they collect evidence, and we'll hopefully understand a little more about what her motivations were behind that behavior in the courtroom.
All right, you guys are weighing in as well as our experts. You can tweet me at Mike Alanos HLN. Call up 1-877-TEL-HLN. Laurel is with us in California. Hey, Laurel.
Hi, Mike. I love your show.
Thank you. Well, weigh in your thoughts here.
Yeah, I would be interested to know if Justin backed into his spot every day or just on this one particular day.
And that's a key. And a lot of you, again, we have such astute viewers. Philip, you and I have talked about this. Let's reiterate the point here. On one side, the prosecutors will say backed into the seat with a rear-facing car seat would make it that much more tough for anybody to see little Cooper in the car.
Right, and that's going to be a big question that the investigators are surely going to be looking into. There are video cameras everywhere in that parking lot, so it won't take him long to go back and pull that video and see what his daily parking habits will be. Changed his parking habits on this day, that's incriminating. On the other hand, if this is what he did every single day, maybe not. We have to take all the evidence together and we have to look at it as one big piece of or one big puzzle, not just a small piece of the puzzle. But that is something they're definitely looking into.
Definitely, and so many of you have noted that. We have more calls lining up. Mary's with us in Indiana. Hey, Mary, your comment, question here?
Hi, Mike. How are you? I have a quick question. I want to know if it's possible if little Cooper was murdered before he was put in that car.
Wow, well, here, I mean, Ebony and others have asked this question, but from what we gather, it'd be pretty tough if there's anybody who saw him at the Chick-fil-A, you know, and then we have the surveillance footage as well. What do you make of that from the facts that we know at this point?
Right, Mike. I think that was early on a huge speculation. Many people thought, myself included, that maybe he had been murdered in some other capacity and then just kind of left to be found in the car to make it look like an accident. But for me, that inquiry was remedied when the pathology report came back to us and let us know that he did indeed die of hypothermia. And so basically he died of heat stroke, leading me to believe that he actually, unfortunately, as awful as it is, Mike, cooked to death in that car.
I know it. It's hard to even say some of these details, but that's what we're dealing with here. And also another tough one to deal with is the medical examiner basically saying little Cooper died before noon in this. And Dr. E, let me ask you this about something that Ross Harris allegedly told his wife Leanna after the fact, saying he looked peaceful. I mean, what is that, a justification or you're trying to soften the blow, so to speak?
I think, and he's saying that for himself even, because whether or not it was an accident or purposeful, I'm sure if they planned this, they were discussing what is he going to go through and having that thought of what will it look like. Will it look like he went through some terrorized, horrific experience, or will it just be a peaceful passing? You often have to tell yourself that this is going to be a calm experience so you can do something like this.
There you go. Okay, we're going to take more of your calls on this topic. 1-877-TEL-HLN is the number. Tweet me at Mike Alanos HLN as well. Welcome back. You're watching HLN Now. We're bringing you the latest in the hot car death. This is a story that's captivated the nation. We continue to share it. We are discussing this story as that man right there, Ross Harris, is accused of murdering his son, 22-month-old Cooper Harris, left him in a car to die. He says, no, it was an accident. Prosecutors say, this was murder. We're taking your calls, 1-877-TEL-HLN. New information we're finding out today, toxicology reports coming back negative. Many had wondered and questioned, well, was little Cooper sedated in some way, shape, or form before he was left in the car? Again, toxicology reports negative. We're also finding out mom here, the wife of Ross Harris, Leanna Harris, has hired an attorney for counsel. Many not surprised by that, as we have speculated and looked into some of the things that she said, this according to investigators, based based on that probable cause hearing on Thursday. So those two huge pieces of news as we continue to follow this case. We're taking your calls. You guys have great comments, great insights. 1-877-TEL-HLN is the number. Alina is with us in Nevada. Alina, your thoughts here?
Yes, the father would have to claim that he has zero sense of smell because he visited the car at 12:30. The child was deceased by then. And then when he went back after work, he drove for a few blocks before he stopped the car. I mean, this is unbearable to think that way. And another thing that I wonder about, didn't the mother ever call the school to say, did my little boy get there on time? Well, was there no contact between her and the father every time he took the child in? I mean, one would think that would be the normal thing that a parent does.
That's great points across the board, Alina. Again, we've got really astute viewers. There's our expert panel again. Attorney Philip Holloway, Attorney Ebony Williams, and Dr. Erik Fisher with us as well, the psychologist, as we look into the mindset, really, of this case. All right, Ebony, Alina had some great points there.
Alina knocked it out of the park, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
she really did. I'll let you tackle whichever one you want there.
Sure, she's so many right. Well, one of them is the fact that we know that there was a mass email sent from the daycare center to the phone of Justin Ross Harris. You know, so to me, that would have been an opportunity for him to be at alert. Also, to Alina's point, how about the fact that he sent a text message to the wife saying, when are you going to pick up my little buddy? I mean, and to think that he'd known that he'd never dropped him off, how absolutely manipulative.
There you go. And Philip, let's talk about that other point. I think it was Alina's first point about the sense of smell or lack thereof. Again, these are brutal details, but the medical examiner basically says little Cooper was dead by noon, lunchtime. And yet, 4 hours later, it would have been pretty brutal in that car, and he doesn't smell any of this. Can that be argued?
I think it could be argued. We just don't know what his medical condition was. It was reported in the local paper here in Atlanta that an unnamed source in Alabama at the Tuscaloosa Police Department, where he used to live, stated that he had no sense of smell. Now, that did not come out at the probable cause hearing. There was some indication that perhaps he has a problem hearing in his right ear. We know that the detectives are looking at his medical records. We know that they have got them pursuant to a search warrant. So I guarantee you that is something that is going to be looked at very closely by police.
There you go. All right, we're taking more of your calls. 1-877-TEL-HLN. Here's a Facebook post from Fast Lenny. Do I think he meant to do it? Certainly not. But I do believe his mind was elsewhere, thinking about online girls or whatever, which sadly took precedence over his child. All right, Dr. E, according again to the probable cause hearing, he's sexting 6 different women, having conversations with them while little Cooper is dying. Can you get that hell-bent on sexting that you forget your own child?
People can. I mean, you have to think about things that happen in somebody's home. When somebody leaves a child in the bathtub, they get distracted by something on the stove, and kids drown in the bathtub in a very short period of time. Where we store long-term memory and short-term memory are different, as well as how we pay attention and shift attention in our brain happens in different areas of the brain. These are all very complex functions that we take for granted. But if somebody is totally distracted by their sexting behavior, which some people would equate with potentially an addiction, then their mind is always thinking about, when do I get my next fix? You know, and if he's thinking about that in his mind, he could have run through, oh yeah, I dropped him off, and superimposing another day that he dropped him off on that, because he has to get back to this behavior. Does it happen often? Absolutely not. Could it happen? Yes, it could.
Okay.
And to that point, Mike, really quickly, that would still satisfy the crime that he is being charged with. Remember, the underlying felony here right now is based off criminal negligence, and so, you know, that still satisfies that requirement, making him guilty of felony murder.
Got it. Okay, back to the phones. Look at my list here. Karen's with us, Tennessee. Hey, Karen, comment, question?
Hey, yes, my comment is today is if he was a free-will child, or parent, he didn't want no children, you would think the wife wouldn't have not got pregnant and had the baby. And if they did want the baby, why didn't they give him up for adoption or give him to the grandparents? I've got 2 boys myself, and I was a veterinarian for 20 years. I never, ever, I mean, early mornings I had to leave to go to the zoo to work. I was always dropping off to their grandparents or the daycare. I mean, he knew what he was doing. Because he put the light bulbs in the car, he knew his little son was dead. And that car seat, it was too small for him. I mean, he's almost 2 years old.
Yeah, you're making a lot of points that prosecutors have made and continue to make.
Many times I'll be going to Walmart or something like that. People will say, hey, there's a dog in the car, you know, and I would go to Walmart inside and tell them, hey, this is the license plate, get the dog out of there. It only takes about not even a half hour, 30 minutes for a dog to die in the car.
There you go. Yeah, we've hit on all that. Thanks again for the call. Dr. Reed, let's go back to you because I think that's what people get. I think everybody's jaw dropped to the floor when he's like, child-free life searches, reading 4 articles. Why? What possible explanation could there be for someone with a beautiful 22-month-old to be doing searches like that?
You know, the unfortunate thing is sometimes kids, or parents have the idea of having a child and envision this wonderful life, and they find out that there's much more involved than they thought of, and they think about this other life. It doesn't mean that they're going to do anything to harm their child. He could still have loved his son very much and had all this great time with his son and wanted another life, which is partly why I think he developed that other life with his sexting, is that he has to be this one person at work and at church and at home, and then he develops this whole other life, which is based on other aspects that he hasn't really dealt with in his life, that need some therapeutic addressing.
And Philip, that's what the defense is arguing. We already heard that at Thursday from the attorney, Mr. Kilgore, that this was a fantasy life, and the fantasy life didn't have anything to do with what happened to little Cooper.
That's right. They will have to certainly connect the dots, if you will, if they're going to make anything of this in terms of a motive. Anybody who has children, myself included, you know, we all need our downtime from children. We need times with our spouses. We need to get away, things like that. Just because you're thinking about something like that doesn't mean you're going to go and commit a heinous crime. So we have to consider this in the context of the entire evidence and the entire case. Yeah,
and again, that's the defense's argument. What do you say? We'll take more of your calls. 1-877-TEL-HLN is the number. Stay with us.
She just started screaming, and she's like, what do you mean Cooper's no longer here? What do you mean? And during this conversation, with all this emotion coming out, she's asked Leanne, they can hear it.
Who's the emotion coming from?
The emotion's coming from her mom, or who she identified as her mom. And during this, she's like, why aren't you crying? Why aren't you reacting to this?
And what did Leanna say?
She said, I must be in shock.
And that's another puzzling moment from Thursday's hearing as we're finding out Leanna Harris, the mom of little Cooper, is talking with her mom. So this would be Cooper's grandmother, and grandma is hysterical, and she's in grief and yelling through the phone so much so that detectives can hear it. And Leanna, seems calm and just said, well, I guess I must be in shock. We're taking your calls. 1-877-TEL-HLN is the number. We know this, that Leanna hired an attorney, Lauren Zimmerman. Ebony, if she hired you, what are you telling her? What's the first thing you tell Leanna Harris right now?
Keep quiet, Mike. My first thing is say nothing, keep quiet. Primary concern, of course, being self-incrimination. That said, to the extent you have knowledge that will help further this investigation, that will do nothing but help you. Of course, short of incriminating yourself, but things that she can tell about her husband and support this investigation in that way, that will earn her very much goodwill with Cobb County investigators.
All right, back to the phones. 1-877-TEL-HLN is the number. Nancy's with us in Iowa. Hey, Nancy, what's your thought here?
Actually, it's kind of a couple little things here. All right, so you have the surveillance cameras in the Home Depot parking lot. That's fine. Can that be zoomed in enough to see if he was talking in that 30 seconds prior to getting out in the morning? If he was talking and he wasn't on his phone, does that kind of verify that he was possibly talking to Cooper in the back seat? And the other part was after lunch, when he had gone past these other people, can that camera also be zoomed at that point to see if he had his original AT&T phone, which would be contracted, or a track-type phone? Because if you're going on saying about how he has this alternate lifestyle, which he obviously does, it's possible that he was using a track phone to keep any kind of paperless.
Nancy with some great investigative questions. Nancy, thanks for the call. Philip's former investigator here. Philip, what about that? I mean, how much can you zoom in to find out the details that Nancy's talking about? And will investigators find out what kind of phone was being used here?
Well, they're going to find out what type of phone was involved. They're going to look at all of the electronic devices that he had, and they're going to go through them very, very carefully. About the cameras, the security cameras that I've always been familiar with, if you're going to zoom in, it has to be done in real time. What they did is went back and looked at the surveillance tapes to see what they happen to have caught. It's possible that they caught him speaking. It's possible that they didn't catch him speaking, but we don't know. We will see the videos if there's ever a trial, I'm sure, but for now, all we have heard is a description of what they show.
Got it. Many of you are commenting here. Let me get a Facebook post out there. This from Jennifer asking, I find it bizarre that Ross kissed his son goodbye at the breakfast place instead of at the daycare. Most parents kiss their children when they drop them off at school. And again, Dr. E, this deals with the, kind of that inference that this was some kind of a goodbye kiss, and odd that it would be done at the restaurant versus there in the parking lot, or when he actually would have dropped him off.
That is an interesting point to raise. If again there's a situation of premeditation there, obviously it lends itself to that. If it was a very affectionate father or not. It might be that when he got an opportunity to give his son a kiss, he might have done that. So those are some things we have to consider, is what was the more habitual behavior between them that we look at from the outside as a single incident, rather than understanding the entire gauge, a range of behavior.
Doctor, you just mentioned habitual behavior that investigators are looking at. Did he park in the same spot? What was the routine communications with Leanna? All of that's being looked at, and we'll keep you posted on that. Much more HLN Now coming up. Stay with us.